Well, hello everybody. I'm Gary from Lantana Removal, Queensland. Thank you for joining me. We're now inside in the classroom doing a little bit of classwork, which I'm dyslexic, so it's bad at any time. But I hope you can see this, because I can't tell exactly what you can see, but this is my old whiteboard and it's dirty and filthy, and I'm sorry about that. But anyway, and I'm not very good at writing. There's no spell checker on this, so you'll have to persevere with me. So when I contacted the Mr. Furner from the Agricultural Minister, the Prime Minister, the Premiers of both New South Wales and Queensland, they bumped me to Mr. Martin in the DAFT, the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, or whatever it is. Anyway, so what came of that is that it's illegal to release lantana to the environment. Now, anywhere where the council or anybody has lantana growing, they are releasing it to the environment. The only way that you can stop lantana from releasing to the environment is to eradicate it and destroy it. That's a fact. Now, we might end up in a whole different world shortly, because the government may change little bits of rules to then try to cover their tracks. But this is going to give you an education of why I'm so desperately trying to get the information to you, and for you to understand why your property values are going to go into the toilet, how quickly they're going to go there, and your children's futures going with it, because this is what the government did to us. So one plant equals 1,200 seeds. Okay, they say it has a 30% germination rate. I agree with that, and that's in a poor to average year, in poor to average conditions. Okay, so at a 30% germination rate, that's 400 new plants per one plant. Now, your government, your state government, changed lantana to low risk, okay, because they say they lost control of it because the councils wouldn't do what they lawfully were required to do. Okay, water spreads lantana. That's a fact, and there's that much documented film footage. I am very happy to take that and rub their noses in it everywhere, because once that is established and accepted and the film documentation shows it, then the whole ball game changes. Liability, responsibility, and what this weed is like. Okay, it also spreads fire ants and others. Okay, but anyway, water spreads lantana, so that means anything in the high countries is infesting everybody outside of that. Check your Boona farmers, you know, they're the most vocal. Check those guys and have a look at what they've been living with on their back doorstep. And then every other farmer in the country is going nuts, because wherever they border national parks, they suffer exactly the same things. So they're well and truly aware of how illegal the activities in the National Parks and Wildlife Service is in relation to keeping this material on their land and stopping releasing it to the environment, which is the illegal act. Now, in that document from the DAF from Mr. Martin, no, it's not his surname, that's his first name, and I don't mean that to be disrespectful, he listed there that that I should keep after the councils to try and hold them accountable for these illegal activities of releasing this material to the environment, which they've been doing for 30 years. When you harass the councils and you go after the councils, they tell you that they have an action plan in place, but there is no physical way that you can go and say, so what's the action plan? Show me what lantana you've eradicated and where was it, right? The state and federal government have to act and place us in the power above those guys as the enforcement and inspection agency to go through and highlight the specific targeted areas that need to be targeted, because that's where the DAF and biosecurity have failed us completely, is because they don't understand lantana. The only process that they put in place was to protect assets, and that's where critically they have sold us down the river unintentionally. I don't mean that they purposely, willfully have done this to our children. They mistakenly went down the greeny side of it and said, we need to protect these forests and these assets, and this is what we need to do, where actually what we should have been targeting is, you'll get this very much clearer as this is explained. Okay, so one plant in good conditions, or like this, steep terrain. Okay, I hope you can see all that. In steep terrain, I'll just try and turn you a little bit, hopefully there. Steep terrain, headwaters, national parks, water courses and roads. Each one of those places generates and funnels water to these plants, and the growth rate then goes, one plant, 1,200 seeds, but it'll seed possibly all year round. Okay, each time it gets an inch of rain, it'll reseed, so it can flower. And if you look at a lot of those watercourses, you'll find it's flowering and seeding all year round. But if we didn't go with that and we went with a safe the strike rate now goes to 60%. Okay, instead of 30%, it's 60%. Okay, so 600 plants from one plant per year. But that's not the problem. If we just go safe and we say 6 times a year it'll seed, and it doesn't matter if it was 3, it doesn't matter. 6 times it'll seed, that's 3,600 new plants from one plant. And your state government changed the legislation secretly to call it low risk. This is their ideas, okay? This is their numbers. This is their system. This is all of their system, but that's in a bad area and poor water. Main roads have been following the councils in the main roads pass on the work to the councils, and the councils don't do the work. Okay, I took this to the DAF, I took this to the agricultural minister, I took it to the premiers, I took it to the prime minister. Okay, and I said to them, where this material is being allowed to grow is what has changed. This figure here is over millions of hectares now across our state, across the entire eastern seaboard, because of your councils. This stuff lines every roadway and every steep terrain, and because it's steep, they won't touch it at all. Wherever it pops up, they now mow around it, so that the mass just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and they've suspended all operations in eradication. We have to turn public's opinion around and start to this is real. This isn't a joke. This is like a nightmare science fiction joke. That's why when I drive through places like Roxbourne out to Toowoomba, I drive through Dundas, I drive through Mount Mee, I drive through Woodford, I drive through just from here from Petrie to Daybra, Daybra to Sanford, Sanford over Mount Glorious. You see this, and that's why I get so upset. That's why I've spent so much time and money on Facebook trying to desperately get the government to wake up and put us in a place, because we are the ones who can get this material out of the steep country, and we leave the leaf litter still sitting on the surfaces at 20 and 30 degrees where they say it can't be done. They've passed legislation to say over 5 degrees, which is virtually flat, we don't want you using machinery. Machinery is the only thing that can make any difference to Lantana. Poisoning destroys the ecosystem subsoil. It devastates the mycorrhizal. It kills all of the grasses and all of the subsoil life that you rely on to stop the Lantana from coming back. But they want to say poisons, because poisons are the only things the council will use. And they won't tackle it. It's too prickly, it's too spiky, it's too uncomfortable. They won't touch it. They have not touched it for 20 or 30 years. These Lantana infestations around this local area are 20 and 30 year old. They didn't grow in the last 12 to 18 months when the government tried to legalise this to allow the councils to not be held accountable for it. But the councils have never had a special get out of jail clause. They have just straight out lied to the public. They've lied to me. They've come to my home here. Brisbane City Council come to my home and said, you know what, we're not even targeting Lantana anymore. We won't even touch Lantana. If we trip over Lantana in getting to something else that's far worse, which we say there's far worse things out there, and there is plenty of far worse weeds, but they don't have anywhere near the volume of Lantana. And now those bad weeds are hanging with the Lantana, and we have that thing that everybody likes to coin. We have supercells. Okay, that's a fact. We have supercells of weeds now that are 5 and 6 and 10 weeds strong. So when you go out there for this Lantana, you don't just take the Lantana, you take all the different weeds in those areas as you go through. But we must prioritise specific targeting, and we're the only ones with the ability to be able to get into those areas and effectively take that out. You've got Borreliosis tick disease in Australia. I'm not sure I said that right, okay? It's the Australian version of Lyme disease. Lyme disease is just something known. It's nothing to do with Lyme disease, it's actually our own tick disease. And it's knocking over bush regenerators like it's going out of fashion. We have people on compensation that have to send their bloods to America to be sorted. That's how bad our medical system is in the country. So you put people into these environments in harm's way with a disease that's not even recognised in Australia, and tell me what the workers' compensation of that will be. Tell me how much you reckon the insurance covers those volunteer labours. Because there's something very serious going on with Brisbane City Council, that it's one of the most wealthiest councils in the country, and yet they brag that they don't spend any money on this. They use the volunteer labour from those other organisations like Landcare, like some of these ones getting grants for trying to help out in these bushland settings. And these people believe they're doing a great thing, but the poisoning of this system in that mycorrhizal fungi underground, you go through those areas and it's devastated. The only thing coming back after 12 months is the rubber vines and the vine material. None of the grasses, none of the surface cover has ever come back. There are no saplings growing. None. You look at it and you go, and these guys don't have anybody look over their shoulder and go, you guys are doing some serious damage. And this is watercourses. I mean, the insanity of it. It needs to be addressed. Then you have National Parks and Wildlife and the councils. The only programs they have in steep and tough terrain that they don't use those free services is to burn the stuff out. So they weaken the forestry. Okay? Then they backburn to the face of the fire and every animal in that fire dies. Anything caught in that pocket is dead. And not one green person ever talks about that. Not one green person has ever said to the national parks, hey, hold on a minute, what you're doing is not cool. The national parks are buying up farms around the national parks, and the green mob are saying to you, this is a great thing. Beating their chest and go, oh, it's a good thing. The only reason why they're buying those properties around those national parks is to push the people on the boundaries of the national parks out, because they can't contain the spread. We need radical changes to our system. If we have to put a 200 metre barrier, right? A cleared zone, okay? All ground areas, leave the trees, take all of that sub-story material out of there, and that's a 200 metre buffer, and it must be maintained by National Parks and Wildlife for the purpose of the people around them. They have to do it by law. Okay, it's illegal for them to release it to the environment, and the only way you stop Lantana releasing to the environment is by eradicating the material. But the secret deal that the state government did was to remove eradication as a word from the deal and call it low risk. Where the hell is that low risk? And that is being flushed down every watercourse, every single tributary out of those national parks. What is the litigation fallout from all of this as your land is so far up that hillside or so far back to that boundary of that state forest? When does somebody start saying to you, hey, listen, my property's halfway down that watercourse and I've got Lantana, does that mean I am going to be sued by the person next door to me and the person next door to them and the one after that? This is your Moreton Bay Regional Council nightmare that they've inflicted on all of us. When I contacted Main Roads said, oh no, we farm all that out to the councils because it works for us, because our lands are often conjoining with their land, so, you know, it suits us. Oh, okay, so you know that the council doesn't do that work, even though you're saying farm it to them. Yeah, no, we know they don't do the work. We just say, you go see the council because, yeah, they're responsible for it, and the council gives you that same bull story that they gave me about it not being a problem. It's a low-risk weed. They won't tell you who voted that low risk, they won't tell you where those meetings were held, and they won't tell you who attended those meetings. I want that information. I want to know who the hell voted this stuff low risk. You've got that Children's Health Hospital document that says it's on record as having killed people in our country. I've seen it where it actually states children and adults. right? But you tell me how the hell they came with low risk when you look at that and look at property values. We have 10 million hectares of this material. They doubled it in the last 10 years. And now, this is why I'm in front of you. Now, where they have it growing now, because they've just pulled all stops off, nothing's being done with this material. Where it's being allowed to grow, there's more of it in this area than has ever been before. Okay? A lot of it was in this top area, and that's bad enough, 400 new plants per plant. This is catastrophic. Now you've got people putting cattle into areas and forcing them to eat the material. There's nothing else for them to forage on. Now either the people owning the cattle or the national parks or the water board, whoever is putting or allowing those cattle to be put into those areas, is committing a criminal act. And we need to start voting on this. We need to have a chat to our Prime Minister and say, hey dude, you've been written to so many times. Your predecessor, Mr. Turnbull's been written to for 9 months. The state Premier, the Queensland State Premier, the New South Wales Premier have been written to for 9 months. They've been aware of this. Now, they obviously didn't take me very seriously as this started to ramp up trying to get this information. But this stuff's as serious as a heart attack. You know, until we start caring about this, they won't care. Okay, trust me, politicians don't care about something that we don't care about. But you want to understand this affects you. It doesn't. I don't care whether you live in an apartment in the city. This affects you because you're going to pay for it. And the catch up from them having done this and doubled that figure, okay, means you're going to pay a hefty price just for them having turned their back on it and sold us all down the river. All of our children, the whole of the country has been sold down the river because of that. They do not have the knowledge or ability to be able to work out where they need to target first. I do. I also have the ability to operate the machinery in that terrain. There is no other process than mechanical is ever going to get the number of material that has to go. The biological controls are a joke. The best that they've ever come up with is say 20% of a plant, not 20% of the whole mass in the country, just 20% of a plant. And we spent millions of dollars on this rubbish. We have a huge weeds conference in Sydney that's based on this whole biological crap. I'm sorry for the language, but we can't keep pretending, we can't keep going down this fairy tale, and most of this will be sponsored by Monsanto and the rest of those people in the poisons thing. Your own agricultural minister came to me and said there's 600 chemicals to kill this material. That's how much they know. 600 chemicals to kill this material. You talk to farmers, it's 5 or 6. They can only be administered at 2 to 3 months of the year when the plant is in full flower. We can mechanically remove the material all year round. Why the hell are we talking about rubbish like that? The damage it does to the ecology subsoil has to be seen to be believed. And this is what we are having inflicted on us. The falsehoods of these things. The lies. You film that material as I have, up close and personal when you're eradicating it, and you look under that material and you photograph it for people, and there's not a leaf been disturbed for 5 to 10 years under that material. Nothing's been through there. Daylight hasn't even seen that ground. And yet these people wrote the book, say to you, some animal might use it. Not what animal, and it wouldn't matter if it was 20 animals. If I said to you, there's 10 animals per hectare, there's 10 million hectares, that's 100 million animals are dead or homeless. Animals do not move from their natural habitat and survive very well. When they're driven from it and they come into contact with us, they survive even less. That's a minimum. There would be 100 animals per hectare. When you counted all of them, there'd be 100 animals per hectare. That's not 100 million. You do the math on what that figure is, and that's the minimum. These guys are going to either triple it or quadruple it in the next 5 to 10 years with where they have it growing now. That's what's changed. We cannot spend another year pretending this cancer is not going to strip the livelihoods of that much of our country. Farmers will not survive, but don't care about farmers. They're those people out in the bush. They don't matter. Worry about what it's going to do to your land prices in the city. Your urban farms around Samford, around Dayborough, around Mount Mee, around Woodford. I know places that are being sold for half of what the value of those properties are worth because the Lantana is that bad. And yes, my advice to you is, you're looking at buying a property, for crikey's sake, don't look at anything with Lantana on it. Better still, look up the road, and if there's Lantana in the neighbourhood, don't buy that either. Your councils, Moreton Bay Regionals, Brisbane City Council, all these councils have sold us down the river. Every single one across the country. I only name those because they're the closest. Scenic Rim, Logan, as far as I know, Lockyer Valley is about the only one that's even supporting their ratepayers with some poisons. They're trying to do something on a tiny council with an enormous problem. But all the others are selling us all down this river. But what they do is they secretly change the laws on you, even in that stuff, and you're buying 40-acre properties that all you can ever do with that land is clear a house pad of 1,500 square metres. You can't even clear a paddock. You can't even put a horse there. You can't even do anything. So the dreams that you bought that property for, you dreamt of taking the timber down on that property and building your fences and making your homestead from the materials of that. Not anymore. Not in this nation. But you won't hear about that. That's secretly done. We have people who have bought properties in New South Wales that the laws changed between when they agreed to buy the property and when they settled the property, and they can't do anything with that land. These councils have no morals at all. It's all about collecting revenue, and there is no morality in it, and the state government back them up. You are buying things that you can never do anything with, and you're being caught in this system. But worse than that, Brisbane City Council have gone to people who've purchased properties. They've been infested with Lantana. They bought the property and they have hit them with notices that they have to clean that stuff up. These are the same people who said, documented to me, we do no cleaning up of Lantana. We don't have to because the state government said it's low risk. But they've always, these professionals, and that legislation from the Biosecurity Act 2014 that Martin highlighted, says that if you ought to know better, we really want to put you in jail. Well, it's a little bit ad-lib there, but they really say the courts are going to take a dim view. So what, you're going to say the councils aren't experts in that? Yet they allowed the council to prosecute people. They upheld the council's position that they prosecuted people for Lantana on their property. If councils have to go in there and clean it up, they hand you the bill for it. They cost you 10 times what it would cost you to pay me to clean it up, and they bill you for it and they put it on your rates. That's a fact of life. But those same people who wrote that, who said that came to my house for Brisbane City Council, just a week ago handed a guy the exact same notice as that if you don't clean it up, we'll come in here, we'll clean it up and we'll bill you for it, we'll put it on your rates because it's a noxious weed. That's a factual conversation. Names, dates, places. So the council knew better. Now, how does the council get away with that? How is the Premier of the state allowing the councils to collect money, claim to be the most wealthiest council in the nation, or one of them, and yet they don't have to do any of this weeds work? They've been collecting this money in their rates forever, and Mr. Quirk says we are wonderfully ecology minded. We planted 2 million trees. We're ecology minded. And these sort of games are being played where they actually are handing people documents, serious documents, show cause documents, saying if it's not done by this date, we are going to nail your feet to the wall and take you to court. And we highlight it's a noxious weed. It wasn't a noxious weed when it was on their lands. Go through the back of Mount Cootha and have a look at it. Go through Brookfield where that person lives and have a look at the Lantana through all of the council lands there. All of the footpaths, all of the stuff the council owns. The wealthiest, well, one of the wealthiest councils in the country, and they will only use volunteer labour under the grant scheme to do any work on this material. There's something really suspect that the government needs to look at, but they'll only look at it if the people turn around and go, that smells awfully like something I stood in. There's something seriously wrong with this. But go back. The Biosecurity Act of 2014 says you cannot release this material to the environment. Tell me, Mr. Quirk, how you're stopping this material from releasing to the environment. Tell me, Lord Mayor of Caboolture, Moreton Bay Regional Council, tell me how you're stopping this material from being released to the environment. Even if you set me loose on this material with an open checkbook, I'd have 10 years of clearing this material from here to Sanford. No problems at all. It's down every watercourse, being fed enormous amounts of water off the roads. So tell me, all the properties that you're infesting that adjoin you, right, that the council said to me, we will look at those. Tell the people of those properties to get in contact with us and we'll have a look at them and we'll sort something out for them. And that's my challenge to you. Anywhere you have Lantana on your footpath, go to your council and tell them. Under the Biosecurity Act of 2014, it says that you can't release this material to the environment. If you've got Lantana on your lands, do yourself a favour and treat it as seriously as I'm telling you. And I'm sorry that you're going to get caught up in this, but honest to God, you need to clean it off your property. Okay? It's not that hard to kill, but it is costly to deal with. But that's why it's better to do it once, do it properly and get it cleaned up, right? Instead of having to fight it for 10 and 20 years and never win. And as you get older, and this is what's happening to a huge amount of our population, is there's a huge amount of farmers who cannot afford to get off the land because their land is worth too much. And our Australian government are letting other nations come in here and buy those farms for next to nothing, okay? And we're losing that heritage because young people or Australians won't buy those properties because the government doesn't support farmers at all in any shape or form. And in fact, the councils are driving them further and further out by their illegal actions. I'm calling on Anastasia Palaszczuk and the New South Wales Premier to finally get off their duffs and take this seriously. I offered to show you 9 months ago exactly why this was so catastrophic, why this you needed to see. You needed to have an understanding of exactly what that means. And not one person has been interested. Lloyd Russell for the Liberal Democrats is the only person who's shown any interest in weeds in our country. One Nation talked the talk while they were here and hopped on the plane and told us they couldn't do anything. Weren't interested. Okay? We've approached the Katter Party. We'll see what comes back from there. But they sound like the only party that might be interested in Australian issues, in local issues of their farmers and their people around them. They have this problem out there and all through the whole state, in their whole electorates. And the councils have been getting away with this forever. The councils have been collecting rates for this material the whole time and not doing any of the work. Don't feel sorry for them. This is a national biosecurity issue. It's no different than the roads program or the water program. We cannot turn our back on that and survive it. The thing with this too is you have watercourses, okay? Watercourses come down, you have a big watercourse here and it all gets infested by Lantana, okay? What happens is the birds pick this up here and they go up to the mountains up here and they dump it up here, okay? This was a problem, but eventually this runs into a dam or it runs into the sea or it runs into a river and it really can't go any further. It can spread that way, right? Yeah, that's bad. It's bad because of this level of infestation here. When the floods pick it up, it's moved at something like 4,000 kilometres where the DAF said, and DPI said that material wasn't expected in those areas for 40 years and it moved there. And they say they reckon the 2011 floods did it. Then they say that they're not sure whether water spreads it. There's graphic proof that they're aware that water spreads this material. But if they admit water spreads it, then they admit this national parks and this high country is a problem. But once the birds move it from here up to here, all bets are off because everything flows out of these areas up here in these tributaries all through Sanford. I know of 100-year-old Lantana in Mount Glorious that's just pumping stuff down into Sanford. The councils come into Sanford and they fought the Lantana, and it kept coming back. And they said to the scientists and the boffins that are supposed to know something that don't know anything, said it keeps coming up. And these guys said, "Oh, really? Well, that's this seedbed. That's this seedbed, 4-year, 7-year seedbed. Every time we clean it out, it comes back up. Yeah, no, that's the seedbed." I clean, because of my 40 years in this material, I clean this material from the high country where no one else wants to. No one else can go. And it doesn't come back. I said to the DPI, said to the Department of Natural Resources, Mines and Energy, I said, hey, my success rate is 100%. I clear this material and it never comes back. And they go, oh, well, you're obviously not clearing it well enough because it's not germinating. That's another lie they tell you. Oh, the machines cause it to germinate and that's a bad thing, so then we have Lantana everywhere. That's a load of rubbish. No. I said, no. 3 years and 5 years later, there's not one blade of Lantana there. Oh, that's because there's no seeds there. Now you're getting it, genius. Where do you think the seeds are? If I clean all the Lantana off here and the Lantana never comes back, where do you reckon the seeds were? You got it. These geniuses that wrote these books. The government just give another $750,000 gift to these people. The seeds are here. This is the 4-year seedbed that the scientists were paid by the government to find an answer to why that happened. That was this 100-year-old Lantana up here. This is what I'm fighting. They can tell as many lies and write as many books as they want, but they'll never have my success at eradicating the material because they don't understand it. They don't understand why every other part of these things that changed here has to be how we map out our future and we go after this material. We need to kick its legs out from underneath it. Fighting this stuff for forestry sake is a waste of our time and our effort. Okay? The national parks created their problems. Leave them alone in the national parks and put a 200-metre buffer between them and defend that line. Every farmer below that line will thank you and bless you because they won't be paying enormous amounts, probably a third of their productivity paid to fight that material from those deadbeats. It shouldn't be like that. Those people that are infesting you. Okay? But they've been doing it for so long and they've been getting away with it, and then they're buying property. They're using our money to buy those properties out so they can push back those boundaries, and the general public thinks this is a good thing. This is the stuff that I'm combating here, and nobody wants to put any money into it. Nobody wants to help out and fund it or help to shed some of the burden of this loads. But this is what we're facing. This is why they have always failed and why they have no idea and no solutions. And the councils have even less. It does not matter what the state government does, right? It will not matter how much money the state government gives to the councils or pours into the councils to do anything with this situation, because they will circumvent it the exact same way they have every time. They know this is against the law. There's no legal way that any of these councils can then claim that they didn't know. Brisbane City Council now has had the lid blown off it because they actually have handed this guy documents to say it's a noxious weed. They have told him they know it's a noxious weed. A weed, they tell me, as a professional, it's low risk. This is happening in New South Wales. New South Wales in the Central Coast something Lakes, something Great Lakes or something Lakes Council sued a contractor because they said he should have known about the secret alteration of the land code for his land, and he took his machines in there and cleaned out the Lantana, and it cost him nearly 10 grand, cost him $7,500 and wrecked his business. And they were happy to do that. They even said they were happy to do that. They even persecuted him to say that his campaign on Facebook was showing that he had an axe to grind with council for them doing that to him. And yet our state government doesn't stand up for our people. The courts have been used and misled by councils across our nation, and I've written to the Attorney General and I've said this is a very serious matter, that these councils have collected their rates for these issues and not performed it. And I have it in writing from the Brisbane City Council, from Moreton Bay Regional Council, saying that we do not do that work. So where is the law? They are enforcing laws and winning in court against you, while they know that what they're doing across hundreds of kilometres, not just in one shire, hundreds of kilometres. I'd say it'd be 1,000 kilometres in Moreton Bay Regional Shire. No problems at all. No problems. There'd be thousands of acres of it across these shires, probably